Jamie Proviance. Thanks for joining me. It is turkey time. You know, come Thanksgiving, it seems like every magazine and newspaper in the country has a recipe for barbecued turkey. I think the word is out that a turkey on the grill is a whole lot better than a turkey in the oven. But it's still something you have to pay attention to. And so today I'm going to show you how to barbecue a turkey like never before. This is the best version I've ever come across. It's apple-brined turkey with big-time gravy. I'll talk about the gravy a little bit later, but first the brine. The brine really is probably the most important step in the whole process. A turkey is a relatively lean piece of protein, and if you cook it for a long period of time on the grill, it has a tendency to dry out, but the brine is going to make it a lot juicier. This brine, and a brine, by the way, is just basically a saltwater solution, but this is going to be a really flavorful saltwater solution. It starts with apple juice, a half a gallon of apple juice, and kosher salt, about a cup of kosher salt to that half gallon. And then some other seasonings as well. We're going to add a couple tablespoons of dried thyme, about an equal amount of dried rosemary, and some pepper. Also, sage is just a great flavor for Thanksgiving turkey, and you could add fresh or dried, whatever you have. Okay? Now, it's important to dissolve that salt. And I just use a whisk for a few seconds here to get the salt till it's melted into the liquid. And this is going to be the basis of the flavor. Now, the turkey itself, I've rinsed it. I've removed the neck and the heart and the other stuff that comes in the middle. I patted it dry. I'm actually now going to just take off the wing tips at this point. And I save the wing tips and the neck and the other bits because they're going to be used in the gravy. They're going to make the gravy a big time gravy. I'll get into that a little bit later. Now over here I've got a cooler, and this is where the turkey is going to sit for the next 18 to 24 hours. The cooler's got some ice in it so it's nice and cold. Got a plastic bag, and I'm going to lay the turkey breast side down into the bag. Then I'll just pour the brine right on top of the turkey. Now that brine is pretty concentrated at this point, so I'm going to put in about 3 quarts of just H2O. And lift the bag up, and by doing that you're going to surround the entire turkey, or at least most of it. If a little bit of the backbone is out of the water or the brine, that's fine, but you definitely want the breast to be completely submerged, because the breast is the leanest part. It's the one that really profits the most from the brine. Just going to set that back down in the cold cooler and leave it alone for 18 to 24 hours. The turkey is out of the brine. It's basically absorbed some of that brine. It's much juicier now. An unbrined turkey has a very short window of time between being juicy and incredibly dry. And now we've basically made that window wider. Plus we've contributed all that good flavor from the apple juice and the herbs and whatnot. So I patted it dry, and I'm going to brush the surface with some melted butter and season it just with a little bit of pepper at this point. It has absorbed a fair amount of salt. Not too much, but a fair amount, so we don't need to use that. And I've set up my grill for indirect heat. That means that there are 2 banks of coals on opposite sides of the grill. And I'm going to cook this in a pan over the middle. And the reason for the pan, well, there are a couple of reasons. One is the pan is actually going to help to shield the breast meat for me. See, the breast meat cooks faster and has a tendency to dry out. So by shielding it for a little bit with the pan, I'm going to prevent that drying. And also the pan is going to be the source of my big time gravy, because I'm going to add all sorts of vegetables and herbs and some chicken stock, which is going to slowly cook down over time. and it'll be a really flavorful broth that'll be very easy to turn into big time gravy. So let's go to the grill and see what we've got. So I'm using a combination of briquettes and lump charcoal. Briquettes for the nice even heat, lump for the aroma. And here's the pan set right over the middle with the organs and the herbs and the vegetables. I'm going to add some chicken broth, a really flavorful, low sodium chicken broth. And then place the turkey breast side down to start with. It's going to cook that way for about an hour. Again, the pan is going to shield that breast. And I'm going to add a little bit of smoke at this point. I'm going to add some apple wood, and that's going to just reinforce that apple flavor from the brine. Just a handful or so, just during the first hour, just to give it a light smoke. This isn't barbecue like pork ribs. This is just a gently smoked, beautifully cooked brine turkey with big time gravy. Now after an hour of cooking and smoking, I turned the bird over so the breast side is facing up, and I added a few more coals to each side. At this point, it's cooked for 2 hours, and I'm going to baste it with a little bit of butter. That, of course, is going to help the flavor, and it will help the breast to brown up a little bit. But the breast, remember, was down so long that the meat was protected. And I'm going to add a few more coals. I like to add the lump charcoal at this point because of the flavor, and also because it'll light faster than the briquettes. And I want to maintain the temperature somewhere between the 275, 300 degree range. And it's going to be about another hour before it's fully cooked. All right, the turkey is done. Pulled it off the grill. It took about 3 hours total. And I know it's done by checking the internal temperature. I want to go into the thickest part of the breast, and it should read about 165. And then what I'll do is cover the whole bird, let it rest, and the temperature will climb another 5 degrees or so. It'll stay warm for a good half an hour. Meanwhile, you can make your gravy. Now over here, I've got the pan that I cooked the turkey in, and this is where all the love is. Remember, we had that chicken broth, we've got the organs of the turkey itself was down in this liquid, all the vegetables and herbs, and that's become the basis for the gravy. So I'm going to strain this. And then discard the pieces. We're finished with those. I'd like to use a fat separator here. The turkey is lean, but there's still some fat, so I'm going to put it in here. And these are great because, whoops, the turkey fat is going to rise to the top, and all of the precious juice is going to settle to the bottom. So we'll just give it a minute or two. After a couple minutes, we've got the fat separating from the rest of the broth. We can go ahead and make the gravy. This is the big time gravy. It's got all that amazing flavor in it. I'm going to start by making a roux, which is butter and flour, using the same pan that I cooked the turkey in. Just want to let that butter melt and mix with the flour, and then we'll stir it until it cooks to a golden brown or a dark brown color. And then it's time to add the liquid. After a couple of minutes of cooking the flour and the butter together, the roux is going to turn golden. You can go a little bit longer if you want to, but that looks good to me. I'm just going to very slowly add the love, that beautiful broth, and stop just before the end, just before the fat starts to come through the spout. That'll do. Now, this needs to come to a boil. When it comes to a boil, the flour and the butter will begin to thicken this gravy and to give it its body. It's a good idea to move from a spoon to a whisk at this point, and you just want to whisk out all those little lumps of flour. And as they boil, they'll also begin to break down. So it's going to take a couple of minutes to get it up to a rolling boil, and then you want to let it simmer. I'm also going to add some wine. It could be a white wine, but I think a light red wine would also work really well. You know, maybe a half a cup. The acidity of the wine is really important to balance out the richness of the gravy. All that beautiful turkey flavor and the butter. We'll just let that cook down, thicken up, and get even more intense. And after a few minutes of cooking it down, you've got this beautifully creamy, incredibly rich gravy. You can season it with salt and pepper to taste. Mine didn't need a thing. It's just great as it is. Okay, maybe a little splash of parsley on top. That's good. Now, let's go to the bird. I think I'll just take off some of this breast meat and show you. There's a bone that runs right down the middle there, and I'm going to cut right alongside it and then over toward this direction. And I'm just going to pull the meat right off of the rib cage. I find it's a little easier to do this than it is to carve it, you know, this way, the traditional way. I think you get better slices. You can come in from below until you hit the rib cage, and you should be able to get a nice big piece of meat. And then you can go crosswise to these gorgeous slices. Now see that? Can you see the juice coming out of there? That, my friends, that's the brine working for you, and the low temperature. This thing cooked at 250, 275, never got much higher than 300 degrees. There's a little bit of pink along the top edge. That's the smoke, and that's a beautiful sign. There's just a hint of smoke in this. Let me just have a little taste of this with the gravy on top. Tastes like Thanksgiving. Good stuff. Thanks, everybody. Happy holiday.